My first duty, the duty above everything else, is to keep our country safe.
His defence secretary today said Keir Starmer had failed in his first duty. John Healey's been alongside the Prime Minister in countless photo opportunities intended to exude strength and purpose. Today, John Healey said Keir Starmer lacked both. John Healey wrote to the Prime Minister, "You have been unable, and the Treasury has been unwilling, to commit the resources that the nation needs to defend the country at this time of rising threats. I am being forced to make decisions that would reduce the readiness of our forces and increase the risk to personnel on operations and could make the country less safe." He goes on, "Your defence investment programme financial settlement, which I was given in full on Monday afternoon this week, falls well short of what is required for defence and the country at this dangerous time. The extra support is backloaded when the pressure of operations and imperative to speed up readiness to fight is in the first 2 years." John Healey spells out his frustration that with defence spending at 2.6% of GDP next year, it would, under the Prime Minister's plans, only increase to 2.68% by 2030, in what he clearly feels is a derisory 0.08% increase on existing plans.
He has done the honourable thing and resigned. I am glad that he agrees with me that we need to put more money into defence. But what is shocking is what he's written in his letter, where he says that the Prime Minister is making the country less safe and putting our troops at risk at a time of increasing threats.
I only came out of the Marines in 2023, so I'm pretty au fait with what's happening in the military. Most of my friends are still in. We are not getting ready to fight a contemporary war. And yet, at the same time, as John Healey's letter said, the Prime Minister's out in regularly saying we need to get ready for potentially a deployment as soon as 2030. Okay, I agree. I think that is sadly and terrifyingly the case. But let's get ready then.
Few saw this coming. John Healey's brand is low-key, businesslike, no theatrics, a bit like the Prime Minister he just attacked. But behind the scenes, there's been a ferocious Whitehall battle over defence spending levels in an age of greater threat. John Healey believes the money he was being asked to sign up to would mean cutting, not adding to defence capabilities, and mean breaching NATO promises.
UK Defence Minister John Healey just resigned.
I had not heard this announcement. John Healey I respect very much. Generally speaking, what we are seeing all over the alliance is countries increasing their defence investments. And of course, it's not easy, because in the end there is always a trade-off with other expenses, which are also important. But the core task of every government in the end is keeping the country safe.
John Healey's believed to feel the Chancellor and the Prime Minister were shorting him at least £8 billion, needed to improve defence at a time when NATO chiefs say the alliance must prepare to be at war by 2030. The Treasury source said the defence spending demanded would have meant cuts to schools and hospitals. Until recently, Andy Burnham had been suggesting alternative means of funding extra defence spending. In his resignation letter, John Healey revealed he'd been pushing for the government to adopt new ways of paying for defence, copying some other European nations.
I had lots of different ideas from John Healey, from Andy Burnham, from different parts of the political spectrum in terms of different schemes that might help us increase borrowing a bit, whether that's war bonds, whether that's multilateral schemes. And I think really fundamentally, government borrowing is government borrowing. These schemes are often kind of ways of relabeling
The markets
that.
don't look the other way.
Well, I guess the hope is that these schemes might allow us to tap into some kind of lower interest rate, perhaps on some proportion of our borrowing, but it often doesn't seem kind of particularly likely that they really allow us to sidestep the fundamental constraints here, which are our high interest costs, our high stock of debt.
Today comes after a string of resignation letters last month accused Keir Starmer of presiding over a vacuum, doing nothing bold, saying he'd lost the trust and confidence of the public and showed a lack of values-driven leadership. Keir Starmer's reply to John Healey's resignation letter protested, "I will always do what is needed to keep our country safe." He said the necessary investment was being made in defence, and significant reallocations of funding from across government were having to be made to fund that. Keir Starmer insisted to John Healey that strong public finances, avoiding reckless borrowing, are part of what keeps us safe. An echo of a long Whitehall row that today spilled into the street. Another messy plot twist in what looks ever more like the last chapter.
Well, Yvette Cooper has been meeting her counterparts from Canada and Australia today, achieving the Foreign Secretary's country retreat, part of an agreement of middle powers to work closer on issues like Russia, the Middle East, or the war in Sudan. But news of John Healey's shock resignation broke a short moment before I spoke to Canada's Anita Anand and Australia's Penny Wong. So I started by asking Yvette Cooper whether the resilience and security of the UK, which was such an important commitment at their meeting, had been dented by the resignation of the Defence Secretary.
Look, that's a tough day for us because huge respect for John, who I think has been an excellent Defence Secretary. And I've seen the work that he has done, including the frigates deals with Norway, including the fighter jets deal with Turkey, and the work that he has done to strengthen our defence.
He resigned, according to his letter, because essentially, as he said, the Prime Minister was unable to push through the money that had been promised, and the Chancellor of the Exchequer was unwilling. And he was only told about the numbers on Monday. I mean, this is profoundly embarrassing for the one issue where Keir Starmer was scoring some high points on the global stage.
So I'm not going to comment on the Defence Investment Plan. It's not published yet. And I think, look, it's crucial that we do increase our spending on defence, and we need to redouble our efforts to make sure that that happens. But I think, look, the wider issue that this reflects, which is important, is I think the UK, maybe really 10 years ago, really didn't face up to the fact that the post-Cold War peace dividend was gone. We were dealing with a resurgent Russia. We saw that back in the mid-2010s. And also we've seen growing instability and threats. So over the last couple of years, we have increased our defence spending for the largest amount since the Cold War. We are going to have to go further.
The commitment was for 3% of GDP. And according to this, to his resignation letter, we got to 2.68. It's just not enough, is it?
We are going to have to meet that, and we've set out with that commitment to do so as part of NATO and as part of doing so. And look, some of what we're doing is strengthening European NATO and strengthening that work. But I think, look, across our three countries, but also across countries across the globe that are like-minded countries, we are having to do more to support defence, and that is important because, look, security is the bedrock on which everything else is based. Like-minded,
but yet the numbers are different. I mean, I think Canada has pledged something like £41 billion in our money in terms of an increase in defence spending. I think Australia, £27 billion in our money, and we were at £18 billion, and actually we've only come up to just about £14 billion.
Well, we're still one of the biggest cash contributors to NATO, to the NATO alliance. That's hugely important, and we have leading military capabilities across the globe. But this is not just about our defence, it's also about our intelligence cooperation. We are all three part of the Five Eyes intelligence cooperation. We need to be strengthening those intelligence and investments as well, and also our resilience, our economic resilience, as we've seen in the Strait of Hormuz. That's having an impact on our economy, but it's that interaction between national security, some of which is around defence, but some of which is also about our economic security, and building more agile alliances between our countries, but also with other partnerships as well.
You brought me on to the next subject, the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, we're all affected by this. We all have skin in this game. But this is a war that was started by America and Israel, where we weren't consulted, that we didn't want, not in this shape, and he can't stop it, as in Trump. Australia especially has been very deeply affected by the inability to export oil through the Strait of Hormuz. But don't you feel just like a ringside observer in a war over which you have absolutely no control?
It's true our region has been disproportionately affected because 80% of what goes through the Strait of Hormuz was destined for our region. But this is a war that is really producing a very substantial shock for energy markets. So all of our peoples want a negotiated outcome. a negotiated settlement, a negotiated end to this conflict. And I appreciate Yvette's personal leadership and the leadership of the United Kingdom in throwing forward and looking to how we can operate post any settlement to ensure that the Strait is indeed open for all of our countries.
But what can you do to open the Strait?
Well, you know, we'll keep working with others. Obviously, what we want is a negotiated settlement. I think, you know, we speak as one on that front.
Mark Carney, the Canadian Prime Minister, gave perhaps one of the most signature speeches of the year, where he talked about rupture with your next door neighbour, with the United States and with the old world order. I mean, how does that feel to have a neighbour like that next door that's become so unreliable?
Actually, the rupture that the Prime Minister was speaking about refers to the global trading order as a whole and other multilateral alliances.
But it was ruptured by President Trump of the United States, your next door neighbour.
That aren't functioning the way they used to and aren't providing the type of stability in the global trading order and in defence and security that they used to. And having this meeting today with the UK, with Australia, is an example of Canadian foreign policy where we are working with our closest friends and allies through Five Eyes, through Coalition of the Willing, through multilateral organizations in order to deliver the best and the most for our domestic populations and the global economy.
So my final question to you, Yvette Cooper, are you about to resign as well?
We've got so many different serious challenges in the world. What we're carrying on doing is working together in order to face those challenges and in order to carry on doing that work. That's what I'm doing.
Penny Wong, Yvette Cooper, and Nitya Anand, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, joining me now is the veteran Labour backbencher Barry Gardiner. A month ago, he called on Sir Keir Starmer to step down to save the country. Barry Gardiner, good to have you on the programme. Are you still calling on him to step down to save the country, especially after John Healey's resignation?
I've known John for almost 30 years. He's one of the most serious, diligent, hard-working MPs. We don't always agree on policy, but look, I want a party in which we can have policy disagreement, but then get together around a course of action that we can commit to. And I know that this is not a step that he would have taken lightly at all. He is a man of immense integrity. We used to sit next to each other in shadow cabinet. I've watched him at close hand, and you know, I trust him implicitly. So if John is saying to us that he is clear that the Prime Minister was unable and the Chancellor unwilling to provide the funding that he thinks is required, then what I'm absolutely sure of is that John believes that absolutely.
So is this a fatal blow to Keir Starmer, this resignation?
Look, I think we should be focused at the moment on matters of defence, matters of this country's security and resilience into the future. It of course is a huge blow to the government. We've seen two senior cabinet ministers resign in the past few weeks, and I think 6 ministers in total. But John is somebody, as I say, he's somebody of huge integrity. He's somebody who has served every Labour leader,
as you said,
from Tony Blair onwards.
But I just wonder if
he's not somebody that we should dismiss lightly.
And no one is doing that. But I just wonder if we do end up with Andy Burnham not just winning the Makerfield by-election in a week's time, but also becoming the next Prime Minister, does that solve the fundamental problem that John Healey was pointing to, that there just isn't enough money to make this country secure in a dangerous world?
No, of course, look, this is not about personalities. This is about policies.
But that's why I'm asking you that. Does it change
things that this country needs?
Yeah. But does Andy Burnham in charge change that aspect of policy over which John Healey, your friend, has just resigned?
No person resolves that. It's a matter of the policies, and I want to see whoever stands in a putative leadership election, I want to see what their policies are. I'm not interested in the personalities. What I want are policies that the country can get behind, that the party in Parliament can get behind, and that we can deliver a better future and real change for the people who are suffering at the moment in our society, because they're the ones at the bottom of the heap. Now look, quite honestly, those jobs may come through new defence contracts. They may come in many other different ways in terms of renewables. There's a whole series of things which need to be done to take our economy forward and to make people feel that they are part of that going forward. So that's what we should be focusing on. It's not this policy or that policy. It's not this person or that person. It's about coming together around somebody who has a clear vision that everybody in the Parliamentary Labour Party can get behind and say, yeah, that makes sense. I may not like all bits of it, but together we can back this and go forward.
Right, and that particular person. So it is sort of about policy and personality. We're going to leave it there. Barry Gardner, thank you very much indeed. Let's go to Jackie in Leeds. Jackie.
Thanks, Matt. Now, senior military figures have already expressed their concerns about the defence investment plan, while warning that Britain faces a threat level unprecedented in recent times. Details of the plan, which was meant to be published today, have not yet been released, but it's understood to fall short of NATO's target of increasing defence spending to 3.5% of GDP by 2035. Our senior political correspondent, Paul McNamara, reports.
We've got a defence investment plan.
But it's a plan that hasn't been published yet and long promised.
And we'll have a defence investment plan come forward in the autumn.
The defence investment plan due this autumn.
Then autumn turned to winter.
The defence investment plan will be published later this year.
And 2025 turned to 2026.
Will the defence investment plan be signed before the local elections on the 7th of May?
Will the full defence investment plan finally be published this week?
The world, say military analysts, has become a far more dangerous place. War in Ukraine didn't just hammer home the ambition of our enemies, but the drastically transformed nature of how wars are fought. Last year, the Prime Minister unveiled a strategic defence review that was to address just that.
Each different branch of our armed services fully integrated to create an army which is 10 times more lethal by 2035.
The hope was that the UK's armed forces would be transformed by last year's strategic defence review. A strategic defence review, I understand, that John Healey only agreed to on the proviso that whatever it recommended could be accelerated if circumstances changed, such as NATO saying we needed to be ready for war by 2030, which they then did, or war breaking out in the Middle East, which then happened. Keir Starmer also committed to spending 3% of GDP on defence. I understand the deal that was being offered to John Healey didn't say when that would be achieved. In short, I understand John Healey told the Prime Minister that the deal he was being offered wouldn't keep our assurances to our closest allies, it would not keep the country safe. The now former Defence Secretary was not just seen as a trusted loyalist to Keir Starmer,
Such a strong relationship between so much to discuss.
but one who managed to walk the diplomatic tightrope spanning the Atlantic and so often shook by the United States of late.
Secretary Hegseth, we hear you.
Former defence chiefs say they're shocked by John Healey's timing, but ultimately not surprised by his decision.
He understands in great detail the difficulties that the armed forces are having at the present moment and how that translates into a lack of capability and a lack of deterrence.
The UK's inability to project force highlighted earlier this year when the delayed HMS Dragon was finally deployed to protect British bases in Cyprus as war raged in Iran. It's understood the Ministry of Defence say they needed an extra £28 billion over the next 4 years. John Healey argued he could manage with £18 billion, but in the end was only offered £13.5 billion more. At that level, What are we looking at? What do we have to cut? What are we not able to do?
Unfortunately, all of this money was generally speaking to go into just making sure that the existing programs and sort of legacy programs were ready to deploy. It's not even really looking at all of the new technologies that we see, for example, in Ukraine being integrated into the UK militaries.
The world is more dangerous. The resources to cope with that threat are more stretched. The government's appetite to change that, says the man who used to be in charge, unable and unwilling.
Well, a short time ago, the junior Defence Minister, Al Khan, said he wanted to do right by the armed forces and would consider his position if he did not think the defence spending plan was right. Earlier, I spoke to the former Labour MP, Madeleine Moon, who's now president of the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. She started by telling me the government needs to heighten the importance of defence spending.
I think that one of the problems we've got as a country is that people think that we can still afford the quality of life that we used to have when there was no threat. The threat level has gone up considerably. We know that threat is there, and I think this needs to be a conversation with the British public about what we can and can't afford.
In the run-up to all of this, the calculations that were being made, presumably, about what could be afforded for defence, which inevitably means something else has to be cut. There are many voices from within the Labour Party, certainly many voices outside of the Labour Party, who say Keir Starmer running away from cutting welfare is one of the reasons why this has happened today.
Look out, don't look in. Look out at what is happening in the world. Look at what is happening to Ukraine. Look at the attacks that have been taking place on the borders of our NATO alliance. Look at the instability that we've got as a result of actions in the Gulf and the support that our Gulf allies are asking us to provide. They are things in an uncertain world and an unstable world we have to take very, very seriously.
And briefly, if you would, just so I'm clear, the British public have to accept tough messages that might be about cost of living support, that might be about welfare, because in your view, defence should be the priority now.
Right now, defence has to be our number one priority. Just look at what is happening around the world. Look how war is changing and how war has changed in Ukraine. Look at the attacks on the civilian population. War is not something that's expeditionary anymore. War is something that comes to you in your home.
There'll have to be a new defence minister in place for this NATO meeting next week. What will he or she be able to say to our allies there?
I can assure you that our allies are going to be shocked and unhappy, because John is someone who, when he gives you his word, you can trust it. And if he's resigned a job that he loves and that he has been highly successful at, it's because he knows he can't retain his credibility. And not only that, even more dangerously, he can't retain Britain's credibility.
Many are now saying the loss of John Healey will, in the end, be the end for Keir Starmer.
I'm unhappy with the way Britain is frequently changing its prime ministers. That too sends a very dangerous message about how reliable we are. I just think we need to be, as a country, we need to wake up to the world that we're living in now. The risks that we're facing, both internally and externally, and accept that the world we thought we were going to be moving into is no longer the world that was safe, that we've grown used to. It's no longer that safe world.
Madeleine Moon, thank you very much for talking to us today.
Thank you.